Hello, and welcome to Sis Table Talk. Listen, I am excited every Thursday, but this Thursday I am super excited. We have an amazing guest. So listen, if you are joining the broadcast, please like, share, invite some of your friends, invite some of your sisters. We are talking about a topic this evening that impacts all of us: mental health, behaviors, triggers, things that you can do to manage the stress and anxiety that you're going through in these times. My guest this evening is the phenomenal, and yes, I also call her my mini me, okay? My guest this evening is my daughter, Mrs. Sade Smith, clinical therapist. And we're going to get right into the conversation. Again, our broadcast is short. I want to thank you for being a part of Sisters Inspire Sisters and joining us this evening. Sade, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for saying yes. You know, I absolutely love what you do. I love your passion about being a clinical therapist. Why don't we start by you just telling us a little bit about yourself, why you decided to become a therapist, and then let's jump right into those behaviors, triggers, and things that you can do to kind of manage, the stress and anxiety in these times.
Thank you for introducing me. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sisters Inspiring Sisters Table Talk tonight. I'm happy to be here, and I'm really excited to share facts about mental health with all of you tonight. What inspired me to begin my journey in mental health and as far as my profession and being a clinical therapist is I was a classroom teacher for about 4 years, teaching Spanish 1, Spanish 2, and a Spanish honors course. And I love teaching. But what I started to notice is that my students were coming in the classroom with a lot of baggage. And in order for me to begin my Spanish lesson, it was like we had to unpack, as I call it. We had to unpack and work through what the fears were for the day, what the anxieties were, what the worries were before we can jump into a classroom lesson. And that became my focus, as I would say. And I was excited about Spanish, of course, but the fact that I could talk with my students and unpack what they were carrying and then see them as if they were taking a deep breath, as if a load was lifted off their chest and they was able to then perform better in the classroom once all of those burdens were kind of lifted off in a sense because they were able to then talk about it. That's what inspired me. And it said, hey, I want to be able to work with individuals and I want to help them unpack all of the luggage that they have carried on for years in order to then help them help themselves be better individuals within their families, within their relationships, friendships, and so forth. And so that was my big why for me.
I absolutely love that. And I just want to say hello to Sandra. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are enjoying this broadcast, please like, share, invite others. We are talking about mental health. Our guest this evening is Sade Monique Smith, clinical therapist. Sade, you said something really, really important when you talked about the students and teaching. And before being able to start class, having to help them unpack their baggage. So actually their minds can be clear and so they can get ready to learn the lesson. And that's one of the things that really prompted you into going into clinical therapy. Let's really dig deep because it's a lot to unpack. And when you talked about helping others unpack their luggage, right, and unpack their baggage that they've carried around for years and years and years, especially in our communities and with women, what are some of the things that you notice in terms of what our challenges are with mental health? Is it more towards anxiety, more towards depression? What are the things that are most prominent for us?
So that's a very good question. And I'm going to repeat a phrase that I've learned from my clinical director in my profession. And we talk about it often as clinicians is there are intergenerational patterns of behaviors. And that word right there, that whole entire phrase, intergenerational patterns of behaviors. When I talk about unpacking luggage, the luggage is filled with intergenerational patterns of behaviors that have continued to repeat itself within generations, within families. So whenever I'm speaking with a client, and before I entered this profession and I was speaking with students in the classroom, they were sharing their luggage with me. And then the follow-up question I would ask sometimes, well, what was your upbringing like? What were some of the things that you experienced? And when they get into their upbringing, they then bring in their parents.
Mhm.
And then sometimes that rolls into their grandparents. And so I let them talk and share those pieces of their lives. And when they're done, then I bring in the piece of there are patterns of behavior. I was like, did you notice that you said your grandmother did this or your grandfather did this? Did you notice that you said your mom did this or your father did this? And I was like, and did you notice what you just said about what you're struggling right now? Do you see the pattern? And they're like, wow, I didn't even think about it that way. So when we talk about intergenerational patterns of behavior, sometimes those behaviors are conscious behaviors. Like I say to my mom, I was like, Mom, I sound just like you when it comes to, you saying things with my son. It's so funny. And not that that is a negative thing, right? But it's just an example to show the patterns of behaviors. And then
Right.
there's some of those unconscious patterns of behaviors that might not be so positive, but it's been such a behavior that's ingrained within generations that you don't realize that you are unconsciously repeating this behavior. And you're wondering what's going wrong. I'm struggling. I'm not figuring it out. Your grandmother might have struggled with it, but did not discuss what she did to cope through the struggle. Your mother or your father might have repeated the same behavior, and now you are in that same cycle, and those tools might not come to you naturally to work through whatever that behavior might have been. And now you're struggling. Not everyone deals with things the same way, and not everything is for everybody. So just because your mother did it doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because your grandmother did it this way does not mean you have to do it that way. And just because her mother did it that way, it's at a place where we have to cut off that intergenerational patterns of behavior because it becomes toxic. So that's the baggage
Wow.
that a lot of individuals are carrying with them and are not aware until we start to unpack. And as we'll unpack, I mean, we're talking about what their childhood was,
Mhm.
their experiences, what their experiences were with school, what were their interactions and engagements with their parents and their grandparents, and pieces start to come together. And it comes down to I have never looked at it as a whole piece, as a generational piece. And when you put those generational pieces together, it brings out the answers to the questions, for example, that you've been looking for such a long time. And now when you have the root of where your behaviors might be coming from, now we can target it and go from there. And like you said, it definitely within the Black community, the intergenerational patterns of behaviors are very present. They show up often. I can't even think of a time where I did not meet with a student or a client where their intergenerational patterns of behavior were not present in what their present struggle is now.
Wow, that is so good. So the intergenerational patterns and conscious and unconscious, and you're absolutely right. There are things that we do and we're like, okay, I see my mother in me. I see, and we talk about it all the time. Okay, we notice there's things that we both do or things that we both say and behaviors that we both have. But when you think about intergenerational patterns, it's interesting because what I'm understanding is that there might have been some trauma back in generations that you might not have experienced that trauma, but because those that didn't heal from it before you experienced it, their behavior from that trauma has now trickled down to you. And now you have these unconscious behaviors or feelings based on things that, and it might be some things that you have gone through, or it could even be some things that you haven't gone through.
Mhm.
How do you start to, and I really want to focus a lot on anxiety, because I think that that's high in our communities. Also, in these times, we're dealing with the pandemic. We were struggling anyway, but it seems like there is not just generations, but there's particular age groups that anxiety is really just becoming prevalent. And I feel that a lot of it has to do with the pandemic. What are some of the things that you in your practice are recognizing in terms of anxiety, and then how are ways that we can cope with it?
One of the biggest pieces with anxiety that's definitely um, present at this moment, and the pandemic adds on to the anxiety, the whole idea within anxiety itself. The population, I would say, from my experience, starting at 55 years old and up, anxiety seems to be at an all-time high. Yes, the pandemic has added on to that, but there seems to be a hit at like the age of 55 where you start to come into the realization of all those intergenerational patterns of behaviors, and maybe some of the behaviors that you unconsciously mimicked as you were coming up. And it seems at 55, it's like you have this moment where it's like, what's going on? Oh no. Your anxiety's hitting you. You're like, what's happening? Certain things make you uneasy. Certain conversations make you uneasy. Certain individuals, certain crowds, being in different environments, being in different communities, different conversations make you uneasy. And then some of your behaviors start to mimic and start to tell us that anxiety is present at this moment. And it seems like age 55 and up are really struggling with anxiety again because they have not unpacked their luggage. And the pandemic adds on to it because, in a sense, individuals, we've been forced into isolation, right? So think about being isolated. Now, all of us have had time to sit with our stuff, right? We're
Right, right.
we'll go, we're on the go people. We're go, 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 especially if you have families, kids, and so forth. We're on the go. But the pandemic, in a sense, has sat us down and has forced us to sit with our stuff. So now you're sitting with your stuff. Now you don't have to get up and go to work or get up and run here. And you're sitting here and now you're thinking back. Your brain really starts to release everything that you've pushed down for years. Your
Wow.
brain goes into a release. As soon as you slow yourself down, everything that you thought that you might have dealt with effectively, or that you might have pushed down in a way you're like, I haven't even thought about that. It's fine. It doesn't bother me. It's not a problem. As soon as you sit down and you have a moment of silence, for example, and the isolation again with the pandemic, your brain will bring all of that up. So again, your anxiety is now being heightened to a whole new level.
Hmm.
And not only do you have the mental reactions of it, is you start to have the physical reactions of anxiety, and to be blunt, diarrhea, constipation, um, arthritis, fibromyalgia. I
Wow.
mean, blood pressure, high blood pressure, dizziness, nausea, racing heart, shorter breath. All of these things are physical reactions of anxiety attacks and or panic attacks. So when you actually get a minute to sit down and you do not have an obligation to get up and run or to go to work, your body starts to bring up years of luggage that you thought that you might have dealt with, and your body's like, nope, you pushed it away, but I'm here. We actually didn't work through it. You pushed it down, but I'm back. We didn't work through
Wow.
that one. Let's try that again. And you're like, I thought I dealt with this, and now I'm sitting here crying out of nowhere. What happened? Right?
Right.
What you did was push it down, but you did not actually acknowledge the hurt, the pain, the anger, the nervousness, the anxiety. You did not acknowledge it. You pushed it down. But as soon as you take a seat, it's like, I'm here. Where we at? And
Wow.
now your anxiety is at a whole new level. And it's a whole new feeling. It's a whole new experience. So you're not sure. You're like, what am I struggling with? Why is it
Hmm.
hard for me to to get up and get myself together? Why am I nervous getting in my car and start? I mean, it just trickles down. All these things start to kick up, and you're like, where did this come from?
Wow, that
Right?
is really
A whole new feeling.
that is so good. And it's also when we talked about awareness, right? Awareness. And sometimes you might be going through these things and not understanding why or what's going on, realizing that these are all actual symptoms of anxiety and anxiety of stuff, of luggage, as you say, that you haven't unpacked
Exactly.
or trauma that you haven't dealt with or trauma that you haven't healed from. And just to give you some of the comments, and again, thank you everyone for joining the broadcast. You can like and share. But yeah, some of the comments are, this is good. Yes, or I'm always nervous and my stuff. So what are some of the things that we can do? How do we start to unpack without overload? What are some of the things that we can do to kind of help or manage these feelings or manage this anxiety?
So one of the things that you can do is, and I say this is the biggest one, is learn what your triggers are. Okay. If you have trauma when it comes to men, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
you notice when you're around a certain group of men or a certain type of man, you start to notice your body react differently, or your inside start to tell you something and you don't really feel well, or you get nervous. That's a trigger for you. This individual is a trigger for you. Or if you're in a certain environment and you're like, I don't know why I feel so uneasy in here. I don't, something's not sitting well. You might have to leave. You might go into fight or flight and you might leave. You have to start to be aware of what your triggers are. And you want to write them down in a book, right? Write them down in a journal, whatever you use, right? Start to be aware of what your triggers are. If it's whatever it is, it might just be as simple as getting in your car. For some reason, getting in your car is a trigger. There's individuals who go back to when their parent was teaching them how to drive and all of the things that they were saying to them while they were driving that scared them. To this day, as an adult, getting in their car, they're struggling with anxiety while driving because they're going back to the comments that were negative that were said to them during their learning process.
That's interesting. Now I have to stop you because you said fight or flight. What is that? What does that mean, fight or flight? And do we have to, how do we identify that, and how do we know if we're fighting or if we're flight, if we're trying to move away from it?
Yeah. So fight or flight is when your body immediately feels uneasy and it's either telling you to flee a situation, get out of there real quick. It's like an adrenaline rush. Get out of there real quick, or let's stay here and fight through it. Meaning, I feel like I have to defend myself. I feel like I have to protect myself. So I'm going to get into this physical fight, or I'm going to start an argument with somebody, or you're on guard all the time, just waiting for something to happen because you're just ready to fight. You're used to having to watch your back and or protect yourself. So your body is automatically
Well,
always going into a fight or flight situation because of your past trauma. Your body has learned to be ready. What are we going to do? Are we going to stay and fight this, or are we going to run away? So your fight or flight is that big adrenaline rush. Your heart will start pounding. And as the physical reactions that we discussed with anxiety might start to show up in that moment. And you'll know when you're in fight or flight, the immediate feeling of having to run or to get away or leave the scene or get out of that store, that's your flight. The feeling of, nope, I'm just waiting for somebody to say something to me because I'm ready to turn up. That's your fight because you're ready to be in protective mode. And so you
right.
know when your fight or flight is present, and that
Well,
will show up in that moment.
this is so good. So I just want to some of the comments. So true. Trigger identifiers and triggers. Yes, in the car. One person says, "I've journaled when triggers present themselves. Even a quick Facebook post relieves the anxiety." And what do you feel, or can you tell us about? So with these triggers, and this is so interesting that even getting in the car can be a trigger. There's so many different things that trigger the
Right.
anxiety. And you talked about the fight or flight. How can journaling help us?
Mhm.
Someone put up, I journal when the triggers present themselves. So one is just talking about, because you said when these triggers come, even write them down,
Writing them down,
you know,
exactly.
and then I guess after you write them down, those are things you either want to avoid, or those are things that you need to work through. But what are some other strategies that we can do to kind of work through that, and where does journaling come in?
So journaling is like a sense of release. So there's a therapy called mindfulness, and I'm pretty sure a lot of us have heard of that or are familiar with that term, mindfulness. And mindfulness therapy, it's creating and finding coping mechanisms that you can do in those moments to help you come out of whatever negative thought pattern that you are in at the moment. The whole idea is we don't want you to get lost in your thought, right? We might start with one thought, we start to question things, and we think about situations from the past of, I should have said this, or maybe I could have done that, or
Mhm.
what if you hit all those points, and then you done took yourself somewhere and now you're crying and you're like, how did I get here? Like, what just happened? Right?
Right,
So you got lost in your thought and you brought yourself somewhere to a point where now you're sad and you might be hitting some symptoms of depression because you brought up a lot of baggage that you have never dealt with. So when we talk about mindfulness therapy and we talk about journaling, your journaling is your release. One thing that I recommend to my clients often is when you wake up in the morning, open your journal and write down your thoughts for the day. Write down an affirmation, for example. If
mhm,
you are religious, write down your favorite scripture. Write down things that you are grateful for, and write down some positive things that you are looking forward to for that day. And the idea is to take it day by day. We're so worried about what we got planned tomorrow, next week, Friday, next year, next month.
right,
It's overwhelming. You know what I mean? So you want to just focus on the day. If you can get through that day, give yourself grace. When you wake up the next morning, then we're going to go into that day. But for that day, do your journaling in the morning to set the tone for that day. If you wake up with negative thoughts, put those down in your journal. Do not carry those on with you for the rest of your day. Put the thoughts in your journal, close the book, leave it there, and you get going. Leave those thoughts there. And when we talk about release and journaling, it's the same with going to bed. Sometimes a lot of us can't sleep. Anxiety hits us at night. We can't sleep. We're thinking about past situations. We're thinking about things that we've said that day that maybe we should not have said it, and we're just
mm,
replaying and repeating old situations really in our head. And so before you go to bed, same idea. Open up your journal, put down your ending thoughts for the day, whether negative or positive, put them down in your journal book and close it up. The whole idea is to release your mental load. I talk about your mental load being like a tab on your computer. You know, when you have 50 tabs open,
yes,
and you're just like, oh my gosh, like I can't even, I'm trying to find this email, I'm trying to find this page. You can't even find it. You have all these tabs open. That's your brain. You have like 50 tabs open in your brain. Close your tabs to help yourself get through your day. What tabs do you absolutely do not need to carry on with you for that day? Your ex-boyfriend, he does not need to be in your tab. Your ex-best
that's
friend, he
good.
does not need to be in your tab. The thing that your mother said that pissed you off, close it out. That does not need to be in your tab.
That's
Okay?
good.
The thing that
That's
your child
good.
said, deal with that later. We don't need to have that in our tab. Close your tabs to go on with the rest of your day. And that's the idea for your journal. Your journal is your release. Put those down with your journal and carry on with your day without that mental load. And so, mindfulness, I'm being mindful and aware of my behaviors, my faulty thinking patterns, as we say, and your faulty behaviors. I'm aware of them and I'm releasing them so I can move forward effectively with my day. and be effective with my night when I go to sleep.
That is so good. So somebody needs to hashtag close your tabs. Close your tabs when you get, and you're right. And we have a lot of comments about um, multitasking and brain overload and releasing different things and triggers.
Right.
And and I knew this was going to happen, okay, because this is good. This is real good. And we talked about journaling, and a lot of us that are in the life coach space, we talk a lot about journaling. Hashtag
Yeah.
close your tabs.
Close
So
your tabs.
when you find yourself, and yeah, absolutely right. So I know we have over 70,000 thoughts a day, right?
Mhm.
How many of those thoughts are good thoughts? How many of those thoughts are positive? How many of those thoughts are negative? But what is it that we can do when we see ourselves? Let's just say we're out. We're not in a situation where it's not morning, it's not evening, where we can sit down and write down what's going on. And when you talked about isolation and being alone and having time to sit with yourself and really think, and those you think one thought, and the next thing you know, you think another negative thought, and then another negative thought, and then you're right, you're thinking about, oh, what happened 10 years ago. Um, what can we do in those moments to just like stop, release, kind of like, okay, I see where this is going. I need to stop myself now and bring myself back in. What are some strategies that we can do when we can't get to the journal?
So in those moments, we can hit what theoretically we call grounding techniques. And when you think of grounding, you want to ground yourself. When you want to reground yourself, you think of stable, being stable, stabilizing, grounding. So
Mhm.
there are a series of grounding techniques that you can do in those moments to help calm you down and bring you back to what you were doing. You could have been writing an email and all of a sudden you went off to a certain place that you didn't need to go in that moment. The
Mhm.
grounding technique, for example, something that will bring you back and saying, hey, I was writing this email, let me get back to it. So, an example of a grounding technique is what we call the 3-3-3 rule. The 3-3-3 rule. And it goes to say, name one thing you can hear in that moment, one thing you can see in that moment, and one thing you can touch. Okay. I can hear the people in the grocery store moving around. I can touch the handles on the grocery cart.
Mhm.
And those surroundings is bringing me back to that moment to say, hey, you're here at the grocery store shopping. There's no reason, you're not in danger. No one's coming after you. There's no reason for you to freeze up or start crying and have a moment in the grocery store. You're grounding yourself to say, I'm aware of my surroundings. Let me get back to what it is that I am doing. And I have a spreadsheet actually that's really long with a lot of grounding techniques. So that's one of them. There's another one where there's body awareness and different things to do with your body in those moments. It sounds silly, but stomping is on that list. If you're in a place where you could do a few stomps and stomp it out for a
Wow.
second, okay, I'm here. The stomps that's on that list. And it's a sense of feel that sensation of your feet stomping on the ground. Listen to the sound, feel what your feet are feeling in that moment that you're stomping. It's to bring you out of the thought that you went into and bring you to the present of I'm stomping my feet on this floor, let me get back to what it is that I'm doing. So that's called a body awareness, and there are a list of body awareness grounding techniques to do. Another, and these things start to get hard. Then you have mental awareness for grounding techniques. There's one that says count backwards from 100 by 7.
Oh, wow.
You really have to think. I was like, wait a minute. I had
Right.
for a
That
second.
is not, that's definitely one I don't know about that. But
Yeah,
I love the stomp. I love the stomp, and you might even make yourself laugh depending on where you are. I love the stomp, and I love the 3-3-3. What do you hear? What do you see? And what can you touch? But
exactly.
that is, and then I understand that it redirects your focus, and then makes you, like you said, it brings you grounded. So let's talk really quickly. And I mean, it's already 8 o'clock. today. You
All
have definitely shared some gems, but the last thing that I want to talk about is the shame with experiencing mental health and then also making a decision to see a therapist. Where, I
right.
mean, this conversation has been great because we've talked about triggers, we talked about some strategies to kind of deal with those triggers and bring yourself grounded again. But what is the stigma in our communities with seeing a therapist or with getting therapy, and how can we overcome that? And why should we overcome that?
So, unfortunately, the stigma surrounding mental health is real and it is present.
Mhm.
The older population that I often meet with talk about the reason why I did not get help because of the stigma surrounding mental health. If you were seeking mental health, you were viewed as crazy
Mhm.
or, oh, they need to go to the nut house, those
Right.
derogatory comments. There seemed to be nothing positive surrounding mental health. And that was due to individuals not being educated about what mental health really is and what does seeking help really look like. So it's not that you're crazy. There's older individuals that honestly just need someone to talk to. I have 80-year-olds that we just chatted up on the phone. And just having that interaction at 80 because they don't have any other individuals in their lives helps them get through their day at 80 years old. That's a form of mental health, having a companion in a sense. And that's what that is. So the stigma is very much present around mental health. But what we need to do as the Black community is educate ourselves on mental health and talk about what mental health really looks like. It might not
Right.
be anxiety or depression or some other diagnoses, post traumatic stress disorder, for example. It just could be I'm having a tough time making decisions at this moment in my life. I need an extra ear to help me work through those decisions. That's an idea. That's some things that some individuals do come to sessions with. It's like, I'm indecisive. I'm not sure where to go, which way to turn. How can I make better sense of my situation right now? It's a conversation between you and your clinician. It's a total conversation. So, as a Black community, again, educate yourself, reach out to different counseling agencies that might be within your community, read about it, and then go out and say, okay, mental health, the stigma around mental health is not surrounded by those derogatory terms of crazy, of whatever the case might be. This is
Right.
actually some things we could do. Mental health is a conversation. Let's open up that conversation piece in order to make others feel comfortable and educate others so that they will seek mental health. No, a lot of people are like, I didn't want to go because I know they were going to call DFS on me. Nobody's calling DFS. Nobody's calling
Right.
CPS. Nobody. Let's have the conversation and unpack some of those things that you are working with so then we can help you be the individual that you're looking to be within your community, within your family system, within your relationships, and so forth. So there are a lot of negative stigma surrounding it, and it really stirs from the past. Again, when I meet with individuals that are in their 60s and 70s, we talk about the era that they grew up in. And they
Mhm.
were like, my mother told me, you don't tell anybody what goes on outside of this household.
That's right.
So I really wasn't saying nothing. So it was like, so
Right.
forget it. You know
Right.
what I mean? And so that's a piece too that they talk about and something that ultimately scared them. And they took that quote of we don't talk about what goes on in this household. They literally took that into every aspect of their lives. If I'm dealing with something, I'm not talking to anybody about it. If I'm
Right.
having medical struggles, I'm not talking to anybody about it. They're gonna think I'm crazy if I go and try to meet with a clinician. I mean, it just added on until it became such a negative topic and the stigma continues. And I noticed that all,
I
all
have to, and I'm so sorry because I need to get this in because someone put this in the chat. can you just really quickly, what about younger individuals? We talked about 55 plus, but what about those younger individuals? Let's just say when you talked about your students, um, 18 through 30, are they in a better place because of their age to manage some of their mental challenges, their mental health challenges? And what are some of the things that they can do if they feel, the anxiety or the depression, or if they're not sure that these are actually symptoms of some mental health challenges? What guidance can you give for them?
The younger group is hard because this generation is led by social media. So the biggest thing is learning how to separate what you feel is okay and acceptable from what social media is telling you is okay and acceptable. So that's often the
That's
piece
good.
where we dive into is what are you seeing and what are you doing, and you feel the pressure to kind of keep up with the times, for example, because of social media. And that's the biggest piece that we're hitting with our youngest people, is that they're being led by TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. So we talk about, if those social media platforms were not present, what are your expectations for yourself? A lot of them don't even have expectations for themselves because it's driven off of social media, their peers within their age group, for example. So we talk about self esteem, self image, self confidence. We start to dive into what is it that you want for yourself in life? What makes you happy? These are questions that a lot of individuals do not know. They do not know what they want. They do not know what they expect of themselves. They are not aware of their strengths. They're not aware of what they want their career path to be. A
Mhm.
lot of them, those are a lot of missing pieces that our young people and our millennials do not have. It's like, oh, my friends, they got married by 30, they got this and they got that, and I'm over here, I can't even get a decent job. I say, but it's not that. You know what I mean? So you were so focused on what your friends were doing that
Mhm.
you lost focus on what it is that you need to be doing. You can't even figure that out. So let's put those things aside and figure out what is it that you want for yourself. And even with our younger ones, our 14-year-olds are being influenced by social media and their peers. So when your friends aren't present, and when your social media platform is deleted and or not present, what is it that you like? What are some things that you like to do, right? I used to play outside all the time. None of these kids go outside. Nobody goes outside all the time. They're
Right.
sitting in their room. Well, when you are sitting in your room, what are some things that you can do? They lost sight of being involved and engaged in certain groups, certain activities. They don't know what type of projects they could get into or what crafts they're good at or their strengths. They are unaware of those things. So those are the things we dive into. Is I have an activity list that I give my younger group. And off this activity list is probably maybe like 40 activities on there. Off of this activity list, circle some things that you would do. Read a book, create a gift for a friend, learn a new trade, ride a bike, um, text my best friend and have a conversation with them. Things that help them distract themselves out of their negative patterns, and dive into those activities and learn yourself. And that's what we go off of. The activity list is very important because these are things that they have never seen or have never tried before.
Wow, Sade, this was so good. So when you think about the younger generation, and we got a lot of strategies. We got the 333, the strategies with how to ground yourself. You talked about stomping with the younger generation. You talked a lot about the social media influence, and I didn't even think about that. And you're right with this generation when you said the activities, even riding a bike. How many actually, I mean, even how much do we actually see children outside like we used to playing, doing different activities? So I want to thank you for this. I have comments, no drive for goal setting, getting a therapist was the best thing I did for myself. This was awesome. Thank you, Sade. Sade, you dropped some serious gems here. I want to thank you so much for everything that you shared with us. And of course, I need to have you back. I need you to come back because we have to have a part two and maybe focus specifically on depression. But
Mhm.
I like the fact that we talked about the different age groups and
Yes.
also the 55 plus, we talked about the 80-year-olds. Thank you so much for everything that you shared. Um, I know that you are out of Dover, Delaware, but if anyone wanted to reach out to you, and another comment is this is so needed. This was and is so needed, and it absolutely is. But if anyone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
At this moment, the best way would be to contact me through my professional email at smith at northnodecounseling.com. All one word, all lowercase. Smith at northnode, NORTHNODE, counseling.com. So to contact me through my professional email.
Thank you so much, Sade. This was great. Thank you for everyone that participated, everyone that joined the chat. Please like and share, listen to the replay, take some notes. Listen, and if you feel yourself getting a little anxious, whether you're home or whether you're out, I know what I'm going to try. I'm going to try to stomp. Okay. I'm going to try to stomp. I'm going to have a good time with it and get myself grounded so I can refocus. Thank you again, Sade. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful
You.
evening. Thank you for following Sisters Inspire Sisters. And if you're interested in being a guest or being a co-host or becoming a member of our network, you can go to sistersinspiresisters.com. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.